Hello and welcome back to the channel. On the operating table today we have a 22-inch Toro recycler mower. This has a Kohler 6.75 horsepower 149cc motor, and this came from the same gentleman that I did the previous mower restoration video on, which I believe that was a 21-inch Yard Machines mower. So same story with this mower. This has been left out in the rain without fuel cap for about a year now. I don't know why this guy doesn't take care of his equipment. I guess he figures I'll repair it, which I usually do. Good news is the motor's still free, and I'm pretty sure we can get it back to somewhat of its former glory, but it's going to take a little bit of work. So in today's video, I'd like to share this repair journey with you. So what are we going to do to this mower? Well, I'll show you how to replace the carburetor. We're going to replace the front drive wheel belt, the clutch engagement cable for the front drive wheels. Well, that broke off a while ago. I jerry-rigged it up at the handle, but we're going to go ahead and fix it the proper way. Just replace that engagement cable. Also have a new chute. We're going to see if we can get this to work. It doesn't quite fit, but we're going to see if we can get it to work. Got a new fuel cap, so hopefully he uses that. And finally, we're going to throw a new blade on this mower. So first things first, I think we need to get this old girl cleaned up and try and get her running. First thing I'm going to do here is remove this pull start wheel, and we can remove that by removing 3 10mm nuts. Let's get the shop vac going here and try and vacuum some of the debris off this engine. Now, because this mower has been left outside in the rain without a fuel cap for a few months, we need to get all the schmutz out of this fuel tank. So in order to remove this fuel tank, you want to remove these two little bushings, which are just kind of seated on the studs. And then there's nuts kind of welded onto these studs. So let's take our 10mm socket, deep socket, loosen up these studs. Take these studs off. Let's remove that 10mm underneath the tank. So now the fuel tank is disconnected from the machine with the exception of the fuel lines. So let's disconnect those lines at the carburetor. So in order to remove the carburetor, first thing we need to do is remove the air filter. And yeah, that's seen better days. I wish I got a new air filter. If you do plan to do this job, please replace your air filter. But wow, cobwebs and schmutz in here. Let me get the vacuum out and try and clean this out a little. Alright, now that we have that air box cleaned up a little bit, let's go ahead and take our 10mm socket and we will remove these two nuts. Remove the rest of this air filter housing. So now we need to disconnect the lines from the fuel tank over here. So one of the lines from the fuel tank, the upper line, which I'm pretty sure this is a vapor line, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that connects into the air box right here. So let's go ahead and pull that line off of the air box. And the second line on this air box is the CCV line, which this connects directly to the engine. In here, there's a little port up in here. This was already disconnected, so I don't need to disconnect this any further, but if it was attached to the machine, that's what you would need to do. So you can remove this housing out of the way now. And then the other connection is the fuel supply line from the fuel tank to the carburetor. So there's one of these little clips. Just got to work this off. A pair of needle nose. I like these needle nose with the 45-degree curved head. I find myself using these all the time. Now let's take a look inside this fuel tank. Not as bad as the last mower that I got from him. Last mower had pine needles and leaves in here. This one should clean out pretty quickly. Alright, now let's replace this old carburetor. So the easiest way I've found to replace the carburetor on this machine is to slide the carburetor partially off the studs as far off as you can get it. Normally the front side falls off the studs like so. And then what you're going to need to do is disconnect the linkage on the other side of the machine over here. Let me get the camera in focus. But what you're going to need to do is just take a pair of needle nose pliers and kind of bend this upwards and out. like that, right? So now that that linkage is disconnected, we should be able to slide this carburetor off the rest of the way. We can finish disconnecting the linkage that we initially disconnected, which I believe this is an automatic choke linkage, if I'm not mistaken. And then for the other one, let me get the camera in a little bit closer. See that there's a little spring. So just lift that up and out, and then the other one should pop right out, like so. Here's the new carburetor, so let's install this in the opposite order. So we're going to take this linkage, insert it into this receiver, take that little spring linkage, very small. Usually easiest to do this with a pair of needle nose pliers. We'll bend this a little bit, hook it into the little hole right there. So that is connected, and we'll take the linkage for the automatic choke, hook it in to this other linkage plastic connector, whatever you want to call it. Turn this 90 degrees and we will slide this back on the studs. Now we need to connect this automatic choke lever. So there's a little spring in this mechanism, so what you're going to want to do is wind this mechanism back towards the handle like so, and take the linkage, simply reinstall it back in its receiving slot. Like so. And we'll slide this carburetor on the rest of the way. Hopefully. Like so. Give everything a quick test. Everything is operating as it should. All right, now let's reinstall that fuel tank. Now we can start reconnecting the fuel lines. So the line with the clip is the main fuel supply. Well, it is the fuel supply line, so that's going to plug right back into the carburetor. Take our needle nose and slide that clip back over to ensure that this doesn't come off. And this other smaller line gets plugged into this little barb on the back side of the air filter housing. And again, this is your CCV line, so there's a little port right here, right behind this little spring for this very small wire linkage. So we're going to plug this back into the engine, like so. Unfortunately, the carburetor kit I purchased did not include a new gasket, so I'm going to reuse the old gasket. So we'll put this in between the carburetor and the air box, and I just reused the old gasket. I think actually that I made this gasket. See, this is gasket paper. I must have put in a carburetor on this mower a few years ago or something like that. So let's reinstall this air filter housing. Slide that back on the studs like so, and then we'll get our two 10mm nuts. Start these by hand on the studs. Now this mower desperately needs a new air filter. I don't have one and I don't plan to go out right now to get it, so we're just going to reuse the old air filter. I cleaned this up the best that I could, so we will reinstall that and finally reinstall the air filter housing cover. Let's install the new fuel cap. Make sure that this works. And it does. Look at that. So I figure the next thing we'll do is we'll drain the engine oil, and the reason we're going to do that now is so we can tilt the machine on its side and work on that drive belt and the underside of the machine without having oil get all in the upper part of the cylinders and whatnot. So we'll move that oil fill cap off to the side. I really wish they made it easier to keep the oil on these small lawnmowers. This is never really any fun. Just tilt it quick, right? So this is the front drive wheel linkage cable that we need to replace, and it looks like in order to replace that and perhaps the belt, we're going to have to pop this cover off. In order to pop this cover off, we're going to tilt the machine on its side. So in front of this gearbox, there's a 10mm fastener there, and there may have been one right there at some point, but it's not there now. So let's take this 10mm fastener off and see if that pops the front plastic cover off. I put that in the bad spot, huh? See if I get it the rest of the way by hand. Come on. There's actually another 10mm up here. Right up in there. Yeah, you can see it right there. Let's go ahead and remove that. Cover is off. Get that fastener. This will be fun to put back together, huh? So it looks like in order to replace this belt, we're going to have to at least take the blade off, and I think we're going to have to go a little bit further than that. This is a 5/8 bolt. Looks like we also have to remove this keeper. Now this keeper is held onto the deck by these 1/2-inch bolts which thread into the block. Now the block is made of aluminum, so I think these will come out pretty easy. We'll see. Yeah, those came right out. Just looks pretty. Okay, that's off. Let's flip the machine back over. I tell you, it's quite the process to replace this belt anyway. We need to remove this spring. We should be able to pop this off. What I gotta do, rotate this? Come on. There we go. We need to remove this metal cover, and this can be removed by removing 3 square head screws. Yeah, that's kind of odd, right? Normally when you see square head screws, they're normally on a deck or something like this. Odd to see on a mower. See, I wasn't kidding. Square head screws. Anyway, you have that cover off. You can pop this belt off. And it should come right off on the underside of the deck. Here we have the new belt. Slide it into the hole to the underside. Let's connect it on the main output shaft first, and then we'll make our connection up here. So you can see that there's just this pulley off the main output shaft. Simply install the belt like so, and then we need to get our keeper with these 1/2-inch bolts. Put some headphones on. Okay. Now while we're down here, we might as well just install a new cutting blade. Funny enough, here's an old repair that I did actually. So if I remember correctly, the plastic shielding of this drive wheel broke. You could see it broke, and the issue was grass was getting inside the gears here, and therefore preventing the gears from engaging with the wheel or something like that. So my fix, looks like I took a piece of fire hose and bolted it onto the plastic, and it appears to have held all these years. This, I don't know when I did this, maybe 4 years ago, something like that, 5 years ago. Anyway, old memory. I love seeing stuff like that. So before we bundle up this shroud here and put that plate back on, let's go ahead and replace the clutch cable for the front drive wheels. And we're going to need to pop these plastic clips off the handle. Kind of spread open like so. Right. Not much to it. So as you come up the handle, you'll find that there's this plastic block, and on this block is an 11mm nut, which we do need to remove that. But this is pretty important because this allows you to adjust the tension on this linkage cable. So if you need to adjust that cable, how much pressure it's putting on the front drive pulley, this is where you would adjust that cable. Sucker. There we go. There we go. There you can also see my redneck fix. just use a piece of wire. And it worked. Okay, let's get rid of this. New cable installation. Pretty simple, similar to the connections made with the linkages to the carburetor. So I found that the easiest way to install this cable onto this block, you notice how there's a thicker spring wound part and then there's also the internal cable. We'll take that cable, slide that over or into the slot of this block here, and you can take the springy section and kind of push it up through the block like so. And, we're probably going to have to make some adjustments on this, but no big deal. Now we need to reinstall this keeper. Simply spread it apart, slide it over the wires, and then it'll pop right in. Alright, now we can move back to this pulley. So you want to ensure that the belt is seated in the pulley, and now what we're going to do is reinstall this plate. Reinstall these 3 stupid square head fasteners. I think it's easier to install the spring first. Right, spring is installed, and we can take the wire, slide it through that little slot, and then push the plastic piece in. It's much easier. Definitely needs some adjustment. So I just made a quick adjustment to this linkage. You want this so that there's just a little bit of play in this spring when you're not squeezing down on the handle. I'm going to go squeeze down on the handle and show you what it should look like. That's proper engagement. Looks good. Alright, let's flip the machine back over and we'll reinstall this protective cover. So now we're on to this chute. And I ordered a replacement chute. Here's the chute, which it fits on the deck. Okay. Really a pretty good fit. But I don't understand how this is supposed to connect to the mower. What they included in the kit is this shaft and this spring. I don't know. Is MacGyver in the comments? I don't know. I don't think this is going to work. I don't see how it's going to work. It just isn't going to work. So I think we're going to do away with this. I'll probably take off this bracket and I'll just use a hinge. Make it so that a hinge works, right? That way it could pop up and come back down. I think gravity will bring it back down, but that should work. Because this is not. And there's my fix to that problem. I just utilized an old hinge that I saved, 3 self-tapping screws. They're not going to come in contact with the blade. They may catch the grass a little bit on the underside of the deck, but you could always hit those with an angle grinder. You know, also maybe it slows down the grass clippings coming out of the chute a little bit. I don't know. We'll have to see how well it works, but you know, it's not sharp. Looks a little different, but it's functional. You know, if you hit something up front, it's still able to come up. And I call that good. And with that, 2 things we need to do. We need to add a little bit of motor oil. Guess I added it a little bit too fast. But we got to add some motor oil and then throw a little bit of gas in there and we'll see if she fires. Alright, just finished putting the engine cover back on. I put some fresh gas in her. Oil is full, so let's see if she'll start up. Not looking good. out a good repair. Anyway, thanks for watching as always. I will catch you on the next one.